My name is Fletcher. Anna here's on our team. Our company is the Hire Talent. We own and promote and create a whole suite of talent acquisition, talent assessment products, and Integrity First is one of the new products to our family. It's an old product, been around, 45 years. It's got 1.5 million data points behind it, been through many iterations, and it's really a fantastic product. We were really, really happy to bring it into our family of over 30 assessment products and all our other talent acquisition tools. And yeah, just really, really happy to have this product in our tool belt here because of all the massive amount of data that's been behind it and the impact that it has on organizations. And we're welcoming Gary Peterson here. He is a career risk management consultant and expert and just a new friend of ours. Has been hanging out and using this product with his clients well before we ever got involved. And so he so graciously have joined us to share a couple of really kind of interesting stories and just stories that he's collected along the way in this presentation here. So Gary, tell us a little more about your background and go tell us more about your experience with this product.
Okay, love to. Again, my name is Gary Peterson. I've got a company. It's called The Edge, and we focus on the easiest way to put it, finding money in large work comp programs and getting solutions on it. I've been involved with the integrity testing. My company's been out there for 13 years, but I've been recommending it to clients well before that when I'd worked for different brokers. I am probably not only one of the biggest promoters of this product, but also one of the biggest users. So I'm going to walk you through how I approach things, where it fits into the model that I have, where I recommend to use it, and I also where I recommend it may not make as much sense. Again, I'm focused on reducing workers' compensation and turnover costs. So I have these two quotes up there. You can't out safety a bad hire, which is a challenging situation. I had two quotes from a drywall contractor that I've had for maybe 20 years. He goes, Gary, it seems like personnel problems become work comp problems, and bad employees sure make terrible claimants. I know on this call we had some claim people that would be involved in the call, and I'm sure they can agree with that because they have to deal with these people that can be a problem. Also, in this recent years, it's been really a challenge in getting applicants and getting people on board. And I also put in here, you can't bad hire your way out of high employee turnover. So from that end of it. What my company does, we look for dollars and cents in programs. We answer really two questions. Is there an opportunity to reduce claim costs by 20% or more? And if so, how? We've created a model. It's based on literally billions of dollars of claim data, both looking at it both manually as well as sophisticated text mining software and analytics on it. We also involved interviews with C-suite, HR, risk management operations, plus job site plant, SOAR, field visits with companies such as this. So just about every industry you can imagine, from manufacturing to food processing to transportation, security, healthcare, and whatnot. We've come up with a model, and we start every session we do with a new client. We go, our goal is to reduce costs by 20 to 30%. I focus on costs, but I have some companies that really their focus is on reducing their OSHA rate or their experience mod. And it can be for reducing the actual cost of insurance or the experience mod. Sometimes it's important just in terms of they can't get business if they have a high experience mod. Our model that we built looks really in four major areas. We look at management, safety, claims, and HR, human resources, who we're hiring and firing. The bottom line is, if we hire a problem, use the term problem employee, they either get hurt more often or claim they get hurt more often. Um, it's doesn't matter how good your safety program is. If these people will have a claim one way or the other, and they can be a really it can be a tough claim situation. So we can make a hire that's not the best, and really 4 years later, we're still dealing with it on a claim side. So these are the different areas that we look at. I have this last year, I'm working with a really large specialty contractor. They had just horrible loss experience, both on a fleet and a work comp basis. I did my analysis and we came back and they were surprised. I said, you don't have a safety problem. You actually got great safety programs. You have an issue with management and more middle management, but also in the hiring. You're really hiring a lot of your problems on that end of it. So that's basically the model how I look at things. When I work with a large company or really any company, if I see 15 or 20% of the losses are coming from we call new hires. We find that really is injured in the first year of employment. Then I recommend the integrity testing product on that end of it. The last slide I'm going to show you today, we did a study involving a large client with 5,000 claims and $40 million in losses. So pretty significant study that we did. So what is overt integrity testing? It's a online pre-employment assessment. And we're really looking for 4 high-risk behaviors: hostility, substance abuse, theft, and faking. It takes less than 10 minutes to take this test. It's 54 questions. It's a fifth grade reading level. It's in multiple languages. The results are instant. So usually this is almost the first thing that takes place in the hiring process. And the results are either qualified or unqualified. And in theory, you're not to hire the unqualified. There's always can be some exceptions to that. The other thing that's interesting about this tool is you don't need to share the results with the applicants as you do with both drug testing and background screening. They're screened out ahead of time, and so that's not something that you have to deal with. The EEOC requires that a test must be either non-discriminatory or validated, and the product that we call its Integrity First is really both. One of the things that EEOC does like about this type of product is we don't really care if they had a conviction or something in the past and challenges. What we're looking at is current behavior. So why do employers use this product? Well, across all the studies that have been done with the Integrity First product, they have an average claim frequency reduction of 57%, reduction in claim severity 19%, and 30% overall turnover reduction. Very significant numbers on that piece of it. There was a blind study done a few years back, and when we say a blind study, one large client that's in the pest control arena, they're in a large captive. They wanted to use the test, which they did. They started using it, but they hired everybody, whether you were qualified or unqualified, and they did it for a year. Then they wanted to go back and look at was there a difference between qualified or unqualified applicants and employees who we hired. Now, we wouldn't recommend doing that. Think of pest control. You're hiring people that would admit to theft or severe using drugs and things when driving on the road. So there's some risk in doing that, in hiring people that you've already got knowledge of some risky behaviors. But they did it and they provided us results. Obviously, we can't share their name on this end of it. But what they found was the turnover rate for people that were qualified was 25% versus 65% for unqualified. 98% of qualified candidates were graded as A or B by their managers. Terminated employees were usually discharged for reasons related to why they were unqualified. 75% of at-fault accidents were committed by those who were unqualified. Unqualified candidates were much more likely to quit without notice. And the only injuries that became true work comp claims were turned in by people that were unqualified. So pretty significant results. Again, this was done by the client, and they shared these results with us. There's different types of integrity tests out there. This test is a overt, we call self-admitting test, versus covert. Covert would be if I thought one of my coworkers was stealing, would I turn them in? That's more subjective. Overt is I steal this much money. And I bring that up because I'm going to show you some of these questions and you're going to wonder, would people really answer this way? And they do. So sample question is, have you ever pretended to have a work injury in order to collect workers' compensation? And yes, people do admit to this on that end of it. Some people, they can go, well, only once. I'm not like John down the street, or, he does it all the time. Another question would be, excluding pills you got from the doctor, prescriptions, which of the following drugs do you use? And you can see some of these cocaine, coke, and whatnot. This is probably a little bit older question. I know that the drugs that we're talking about have been updated, some at this point in time. How often have you hit somebody in anger in the past year? And you can see the different responses here. We took this test with a group of people, and we were going to try to fail for hostility, and we didn't, which kind of scared us. But across the board, about 1% of the applicants failed for hostility. And it's just, these are just people you just do not want out there in your workforce. Another question, how often have you told a lie since age 16? And this question gets at what we call the faking scale. You have to fail on this scale, you have to get 14 questions wrong, all 14 of them. And they are questions like, how often have you told a lie since age 16? How often have you been angry since age 16? How often, in different questions of that nature. And so really, somebody that fails this scale, all 14 of them, they either are lying or they got some other issues that can be challenging from an employee's standpoint. Across the board, we have average qualification rate of 77 or 77% of the people pass this test. Non-qualification, 23%. And you can see the different categories. This varies some by year, but you can see drug use at 5%, fail for that, theft 8%, faking 12%, and then hostility 1%. Faking seems to be tied most greatly to workers' compensation. We see that being a scale directly tied to incidents of workers' compensation. If you add up those total there, it adds up to more than 23%, because people may fail in more than one area. And often you'll see drug use and theft go hand in hand on that end of it. So why would somebody admit to high-risk behaviors? And the reason is we call cognitive dissonance. We'll rationalize risky behaviors as normal on that end of it. And so we think, well, who would do that? And I always use an example about speeding. Speeding, by the way, is not on this test. And the test is only designed for applicants, not for existing workforce. But most of us, or many of us, I should say, we know that speeding is against the law. We know it's wrong, but we'll admit to it. And that's similar to why people will admit to these different behaviors on integrity tests.
So real quick, before you jump into this study, there's an interesting question here, Gary. Does this test identify applicants who may not be able to fully perform all job duties, but say they can? I'm assuming, Elisa, this is the scenario, right? Where you've got somebody who comes in and you ask them, can you lift over 50 pounds? Can you do this? Can you do that? And they're like, yes, 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 yes. and then they are hired, and ultimately they cannot, right? They're they've got known conditions that prevent them from doing that kind of thing, right, Gary?
Right. So this wouldn't directly tie to that in terms of, on that end of it. It does pick up if people are not truthful, and pick up on that end of it. So that may be an issue. Post offer employment testing is a great tool. I really like the tool, but it's much more challenging and expensive. And I see in more cases for really large organizations, it's not ruling them out. It might be grading them into different categories or jobs they can have within the organization. Great tool. This particular tool, why I like it is it's very inexpensive, and very consistent across the board from that end of it.
Yeah. So you might pick up some of those the liars and the people, and which is one of the things where we see the data is very heavy on picking up folks that are predisposed to telling you what you want to hear, but not actually doing what they say they're going to do, right?
Right. So again, I use this tool with my clients. One, I think a high percentage of new hires are driving the costs. And I'd like to show you the study. It just recently completed this on this, a very large client of mine. The study involves 5,000 work comp claims and $40 million in losses. This client is in the healthcare industry. They had a high percentage of incurred costs are coming from what we call new hires to their organization. They started the process by doing a pilot study. They did a pilot of 10 major locations, which accounted for about a third of their overall losses. After they did it for a year, the results were incredible. The reduction that they saw in terms of costs coming from new hires, they rolled it out across the board after that. And about 6 months into rolling it across the board, they were in the middle of with the pandemic. And once they came out and required mandatory vaccinations, they were seeing a lot of employees quit, and they were nervous about not getting enough candidates. So they put the program on pause. So this is probably the largest study I've seen with this product overall. But we have before they did integrity testing, after they did integrity testing, and then after stopping integrity testing. So prior to doing integrity testing, 33.1% of the dollars were from new hires, people employed less than 1 year. After doing the integrity testing, it dropped to 14.5%. And again, this is for all employees. So some had only used this thing for less than 6 months, and included the pilot locations. So it still had a significant impact even on that short time frame. After they stopped using integrity testing, it went up to 33.1. It's just a coincidence. It's exactly the same 33.1. If we looked at the losses once they develop after a month or so, I'm sure it'll be 34% or 32%. It won't be exact, but that was pretty interesting. Then I thought, well, wait a minute here. What about the pilot locations? The pilot locations have been using this product for a full 18 months. What kind of results did they see? So prior to using the integrity testing, we had a 34.9% of incurred costs from new hires. It dropped to 6.7% after using integrity testing. And then since they paused using it, it shot up to 45.3%. So pretty dramatic results across the board. To my knowledge, this is the largest study that's ever been done with a product like this. I'm working with this client of mine. We just did a kind of a year-end quick look at just the frequency of claims from new hires. And right now, the frequency of claims from new hires across the board is at 39.5%, which is pretty significant on that. And I'm seeing that with more and more clients. We're seeing a higher percentage of new hires driving a lot of the losses from that end of it.
Yeah.
So large scale study. I don't know, Fletcher, if you had any comments on that.
Yeah, there's a good question. What about union environments? And I mean, the question how does this analysis work from a union environment? So I don't know if the question is can you get unions to accept this as a pre-screening tool like drug testing, or from an analysis perspective? I mean, we can talk about, there's two different questions there ultimately, right? So have you experienced getting unions to accept this kind of screening in their environment?
I have, and again, it is something that has to be negotiated up front. I've seen that, and unlike anything else, drug testing or other things, that is negotiated in there. And so I have seen it. I don't have a lot of experience in the union environments with it. Great question, but we do see it, and it's just like negotiating anything else that you do in the union contract.
Yeah.
From that end of
Talk
it.
talk maybe a little bit about the analysis, because it doesn't really matter whether it's union or non-union. How do we do these studies? And there's dozens and dozens of these studies that are done both formally and informally. But just talk through a little bit of the process of getting a study done.
So the process, and for any client, we'll do the study. Obviously, the larger it's just more credible on that end of it. To do the study, especially if we want the work comp information, we want to see, we do the before and after, and we use, point in time data. So we're not comparing, green losses to mature losses and things of that nature. But we do it when we're doing the study. It requires really a deep dive. And one of the challenges we face is a lot of times the loss information we get from the insurance carrier or the TPA, there's some issues with the data integrity. So we have to go back through and look at it from that end of it to make sure the data is credible. One of the things we see with some TPAs, if they don't have the date of hire, it'll revert back to date of birth or maybe the date of the injury. So we got to make sure the data is very clean that we're looking at. And the other thing that is interesting, one of the first ones I did when I first got involved with this product was a large restaurant group. And in fact, I was so excited to see the results. I couldn't wait. I looked at the data at 11 months and dove into it. And I was just heartbroken. It didn't look like there was any difference between on the screening did. And I called the Integrity First people and I said, I'm concerned, here's what went on. They go, it's never happened before. Let's make sure we got the data and what took place. And what I found out was a lot of the locations, they were not using the test. So the people that I thought, were in the new hire group, they had not used the test. And even worse, they hired a lot of people that were unqualified. Once I pulled the data out and had clean data, it was like an 84% difference. It was dramatic. I actually wrote the article and I went from terror to triumph because I was so sick about it when I first looked at it until I did the analysis. So for any client, we look at that. We like to also look at turnover. For many clients, the turnover savings are greater than the work comp savings. And there's also, historically, the product has been sold from a risk management standpoint and then fought opposition internally with HR. And I'm finding that really changing, especially as HR recognizes the impact on turnover. And the two significant reasons, the two major reasons why people don't buy this product, first of all, from a cost standpoint, has never been a reason. The real reason or reasons they give why they may not buy the product is they're afraid about not getting enough candidates and getting people hired. And on that end of it, or will people really answer the test that way? And once people understand that, we are reducing the turnover by 30%, although we may impact the new people coming in by 20%, we're a net gain on that. And also the people that we're screening out are the people that may only last 3 or 4 days anyways. So you really haven't come out ahead on that end of it.
Well, that's where, you can't out bad hire turnover, right? You end up spending so much time and energy, right, on hiring someone, and then for them to just not work out in the first week or 30 days, and you're redoing all that work, and all the time spent to try to onboard those people, get them acclimated, even in these frontline jobs that, maybe don't take a ton of training or onboarding, they take enough where that's distracting from your best employee who's often in training these people, right?
Right.
And there's a decrease in production during the training period. And if those people never get out of it, or they get out of it and very shortly are turned over, it's huge costs. And I spent a lot of time thinking about the cost of turnover, and just like coming up with and helping people walk through that, because there is a hard cost, but the soft costs are out of control. I mean, the hard costs can be, 4 to 14,000 per hire, right? Like
Right.
really mathematically, you can just add up the cost of a uniform and the time spent training somebody and the drug tests and the this and that, right? Add up to somewhere in that 4 to 14K range. But the lost productivity component is out of control. And I use a simple analogy of, like, in a manufacturing environment, you create a $10,000 worth of widgets, but it takes a new person a month to get up to speed. So the first 30 days you just lost, or 20 days working days, you just lost $100,000 in productivity.
It impacts the whole, to your point, it impacts the whole team in
Right.
many cases. What's also interesting when in the study I did here is looking at not just the new hires, but looking at the overall had a reduction. When they first rolled out the pilot, we saw improvement because it has an impact. If we have high turnover or people out because they're injured or claim they're injured, it puts more stress on the overall organization. And
Yeah.
so, from that end of it, they're doing twice as much work
Yeah.
in terms of
Burnout,
what they're doing. So
management.
it really does. I had one of the major manufacturers that I worked with, the plant manager at their largest facility, he goes, "You don't understand what turnover does to our operation." He goes, because I was talking, $10,000. He goes, "No, it's over $60,000." I mean,
Yeah.
he just said that's the impact of what
Yeah.
turnover has when I look at overall. So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
good
So
points.
good question here. So what sizes work best with? So, I mean, Gary works with really large organizations, and obviously, that requires his expertise in, typically he's looking at the 4-quadrant model. Although I think sometimes it's as simple as just including this product into that mixture. The and this is where you get these big statistically valid data points. So there are tons and tons of smaller companies, and the smaller companies tend to be, usually like 50 to 100 employees who use this. And some of these organizations have 100% fix rate. Like, the problems go away completely, right, when they use these. But again, that's a much more anecdotal and less statistically valid. And that's again where, Gary shared some of the global data points. It's based on that. That's based on a 554,000 person study across lots and lots and lots of organizations. So that's sort of your leveler. So if you think about, if you're a 20 person, 100 person, 300 person organization, which would be small compared to the studies that Gary does, you can use the global reduction type averages to sort of calculate where your starting point is. You'd want to be within 20% of 60% reduction, right? If you have a 40% reduction in claims frequency, severity, if you could have an 80% reduction, right, would be sort of the range that you could expect in terms of results. But making it statistically valid would be difficult, but that's where we have the massive 500,000 person study across so many organizations, right?
I brought it to a couple different insurance carriers now that have been promoting it, using it, but my frustration was, how do we get it to a level and get the knowledge, the level out there to smaller employers? Because just to your point, it has that big of an impact on them. But how do we get it out there and get the knowledge out there? And I found some of the insurance companies will do that and promote it out there. I've got one they work with. They go 40% of our losses are from new hires. And this is probably the easiest tool we can give those people. It's much less expensive than trying to send safety out and work with all these small employers and get things done. And it's a tool that we can put in front of them that our clients where actually they have gained clients because this product was out there on
Yeah.
that end of it. They've won competition. Again, these aren't huge clients. These are clients every day, but it's just as painful on turnover or more so because you have less elasticity in the operation to make up. If I'm missing one person and I got a 20-person operation, it's painful to keep things
Yeah.
going.
A great example of that is one of our partners is Zenith, and they primarily work with smaller organizations, like 0 to a few hundred employees, right?
Mhm.
So kind of a good case study there, for smaller employers, Zenith, one of the top, risk folks in this world and in West Coast, right? So
Are there any other questions, or they're not able to kind of ask on that or bring into it? The one thing I would say is, if you have any questions about the product or ideas or things you just want to, tell me about a circumstance or call Fletcher, feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to just walk you through it, and we'll tell you, give you our opinion on that end of it.
yeah, and we love to do studies. It takes less work than most employers think it does, because Gary or us, depending on the situation, will come in and we'll help you collect the data up front, and at the end of the first year we always ask whether the employer participates, is another story, but hey, give us these data points and we'll prove it to you, right? Which then you talk about the EEOC requirements, we give the employers in return the most defensible, hiring program they could ever possibly imagine. Oh, and by the way, it makes them more inclusive. So, diversity, equity, inclusion is a big issue. I'm working with a big, huge logistics company, Usin, here in their DEI program across the board, not just Integrity First, but their whole program, but assessments that are valid and non-discriminatory are actually more inclusive, because they don't care the color of your skin or what disabilities or how old you are. They don't judge you on those things, unlike interviewers do.
Mhm.
Right.
First thing I did when I started really promoting the product was meet with an attorney, because I'm a risk manager background. Okay. So I worry about risk. Okay. And so I met with an attorney. He explained just what you did, Fletcher. He explained to me, no, this is probably one of the safest things you can do, compared to an interview or anything else that can be done. This is a much safer process. So, and if you want to have trouble looking for data, I'd be happy to help out and look at the data. So just ahead of time, looking at what percentage, with some carriers, it's harder to get that information, but I can help you through that or work with your broker. We see a lot of I call middle market insurance brokers use this tool as offering, a real advantage to their clients and getting results. So we see it all over the place. So
You always
I have
have
a tendency to focus on large ones, but this is a great tool across the board.
you always have a good story, so one of the things I love about what you do from a data perspective, and we're big data people too, and just remember, Gary and I come from really two different worlds. I'm a talent acquisition and a talent assessment, but everything in my world has always been about performance and about filling my funnel full of great people and hiring high performers. Gary's always been about risk management. Now our two worlds collide here, right, with this product. And so it makes kind of a fun, when we get to collaborate with clients to help them solve their talent acquisition problem. Because I come in and just like Gary, I mean, it's almost 100%, if not 100%, make a measurable impact in their talent acquisition effort in order to attract and engage people in their funnel. But Gary makes a measurable impact in terms of their work comp costs, and subsequently, as a side effect, also their turnover there.
Well,
But
Well, to support what you're saying there, for me, since you've been involved, Fletcher, in the operation, is historically, if a client said, "Well, I just can't get enough candidates," I would just have to. I have no answer, okay,
yeah,
to that. And so to have you involved and your team involved in helping people, look at how they're hiring, where they're getting candidates, how we can improve that process. for me, it's great because I have an answer. Before that, I really didn't have an answer to give
Yeah,
them
yeah.
on that end of it.
Well, I guess what I was saying is data. I kind of got sidetracked, but the data, the way you dig into data, and you said talked about in that restaurant example, but I'd love you to talk a little bit more because sometimes the data is sort of hidden, right? Like you give okay, there was 100 claims last year to the executive team, and they look at it sort of collectively, typically, right, and more big picture.
Mm.
But what happens when you actually start to look at every single claim?
So that's a good point. When I do my studies, I do a deep dive into a certain representative number of claims. When I say deep dive, I get access to the claim notes. And I will literally read every note in a file. It's painful. It takes a lot of time, but I learn more about the company, about the challenges and things that I see. And quite honestly, we find a lot of embarrassing stories where we've been hiring people we just should not have hired. I remember I had a large janitorial company I worked with, but I was looking at one of the claims and they hired a person who had 3 serious health conditions, physical conditions. Her current restrictions were she could only work a maximum of 2 hours and she had to have frequent breaks. And a manager who needed a body to clean the bank building hired that person and we had 3 or 4 injuries after that and it was very expensive. But the challenge and why I like this tool also, it's a discipline because when a hiring manager or somebody needs a body and needs somebody out there, they don't always make good choices. And because they're trying to solve their instant, short-term issue, it can cost the company, in that case, it costs over $100,000 because they were just trying to fill one spot on that case. And I understand the challenge on that, but when I bring those stories up, because I do the deep dive, it really helps senior management buy into the process.
Yeah.
They understand. And I'm kind of amazed at how often I will do a deep dive and I will print out the notes and go through it and how often the CEO of a company, major companies, will say, no, I want to see how this works and what's driving our costs.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that immediate world's on fire and make a huge mistake to solve that problem, that immediate pain, when just a tiny bit of patience, really. I mean, really all this does is, I mean, I love this, like HR people love this because they have to get the wrath of what happens when the hiring manager makes a poor decision, right? And they're having to deal with that aftermath often cases, and they can't be in every interview, and they can't make the hiring managers ask the right questions or use candidate scorecards or check references. I mean, they can advise them and they can guide them on doing those things, but then then the hiring manager throws all those best practices out the window. And this is just sort of a very basic level layer that makes sure that the worst of the worst offenders don't get through, right? And
Mm.
yeah, it's just really remarkable.
What was interesting is our first client that we did together had the call with was in senior care in the Midwest, but she was almost in tears
Yeah,
because she was using the product. They paused for the reasons what I mentioned, and she wanted to bring it back in, but she recognized she worked so hard to get her experience mod well under 1, and then she just took 3 major losses, and knowing that in her case, again, not a really large client, she knows it's going to impact her for years to come.
yeah. One of those was like somebody happened in the first week. I think it was like
Right.
somebody came in, they quit, and then like a week later they got a call from an attorney.
Yep. Happens.
Yeah,
It happens quite a bit.
unfortunately. Yeah,
Or in California, we see they stopped at the attorney before they went to the doctor.
yeah, yeah.
That-
Those are the scariest ones, obviously. So
yeah.
cool. What other questions are coming up, guys? We'll let everybody get back to their lunch or maybe end their day, depending where you're at in the world.
Well, thank you very much for your time. And again, any questions and you want to follow up, nobody buys us just off a presentation like this, we usually have a follow-up presentation and talk with other people that are involved in decision making. But on any of this, if you'd like to just learn more, feel free to reach out and be happy to talk to you.
Yeah, Anna will shoot out a note here afterwards and tag Gary on there, and definitely reach out, and we can get you guys connected, and you can do a one-on-one and dig a little deeper into your unique situation. And we're happy to share what others have done in those cases and see if it could be helpful for you. And would just want to see people, have a better hiring process and a happier outcome. And we all know that, working in an organization where we are able to live up to our core value of integrity first, is just makes the world a better place for all of us that are involved in those organizations. And it's been a rough couple of years, and it's time to get back to focusing on building the culture of our organizations. And, we're keenly focused on that.
Thanks all.
Thanks, guys. See ya. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.